An hour after delivery, they took my baby and left me broken. 6 months later, I held my son in my arms again and became the ghost that hunted them. If anyone told me life could be this cruel, I wouldn't have believed them. I grew up without parents, without anyone to call family. By the time I was 10, I had already learned what loneliness tasted like. By 13, I was already teaching myself to smile at pain because crying didn't change anything. The orphanage was my world, cold and crowded, yet empty at the same time. Kids came and left when families adopted them, but no one ever chose me. I remember staring out the windows at night, watching cars drive by, wondering if one of them would stop and someone would finally come for me. No one ever did. By 19, I had already aged inside. I didn't believe in love, not until I met Michael. He wasn't just a boy to me, he was hope. The first time he called me special, I almost cried. I thought, maybe for once, I wasn't invisible. Michael was kind, protective, and for the first time, I believed I could belong somewhere. But Michael's family, the Harrisons, never truly accepted me. I was an orphan, a girl with no last name that carried weight, no pedigree, nothing to offer. They smiled in my face, but I saw the way Mrs. Harrison's eyes narrowed when Michael held my hand. I saw the way Mr. Harrison's jaw tightened whenever I laughed too loudly. When I found out I was pregnant, I was scared, but strangely, I was also happy. A part of Michael and me would live forever. A family of my own. I thought maybe, just maybe, the Harrisons would soften, that they would embrace me because of the child. And at first, it seemed like they did. They played the role of loving in-laws perfectly. Mrs. Harrison bought me fruits, maternity dresses, and whispered, "Don't worry, Emily, you're part of the family now." Mr. Harrison patted my shoulder during dinners, calling me daughter. Even Michael looked at me with a glow in his eyes, telling me we were building a future. But it was all a lie. The day I gave birth was the happiest and cruelest day of my life. My son, my beautiful baby boy, came into this world with the tiniest cry. I held him for barely an hour before exhaustion pulled me under. When I woke up, my arms were empty. My baby was gone. At first, I didn't panic, thinking maybe the nurse had taken him for tests. But then I saw the envelope by my bedside. Inside was $5,000 in cash. No note. No explanation. Just money, as if that could replace my child. I screamed. I begged the nurses to tell me where he was, but they avoided my eyes. One doctor sighed and muttered, "The Harrisons have taken the baby. Legally, they're the guardians now." I thought I was going insane. Guardians? How? I was his mother. I carried him for 9 months. I almost died giving birth to him. And yet, in one cruel twist, he was stolen from me. 3 days later, when I was strong enough to walk, I went straight to the Harrisons' mansion. My heart was pounding, but I was determined. I would see my son. I banged on the gate until Mrs. Harrison appeared. She was dressed elegantly, in a silk robe, sipping coffee as if nothing in the world could trouble her. "Please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "I just want to see my son. Please, let me hold him. Just once." Her face hardened. "Emily, you're not fit to raise a Harrison. You're nothing but a girl with no family, no background. We gave you money, take it and build your life. The boy is ours now." I fell to my knees, clutching the gate. "He's mine. He's my baby." She turned to the security guards and said coldly, "Remove her." The guards dragged me away while I screamed until my throat burned. Neighbors peeked from their windows, whispering, while I was thrown out like garbage. That was the day I truly broke. I spent hours wandering in confusion. I couldn't sleep, hoping they pity me. I clutched the little hospital bracelet with my baby's birth details on it. Michael never came out. Not once. I realized then that he had chosen them, his family, over me. But here's the thing about broken people. Sometimes we find strength in the cracks. And I swore that day, even if it took me years, I would fight to get my son back. When the sun finally set, I picked myself up and walked away. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't keep standing there. My baby was gone. Michael had betrayed me. And the Harrisons had won for now. I found a small apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't much. The paint was peeling, the floor creaked, and the mattress was so thin I could feel the springs in my back. But it was mine. For walls and a roof where I could breathe, without someone telling me I wasn't good enough. That night, as I lay staring at the cracked ceiling, I made a promise. If they think they've broken me, they're wrong. I will get my son back. Even if it takes me years, even if it costs me everything, I will not stop until he's in my arms again. I started drafting plans. I wrote in an old notebook I found at a thrift store, filling it with ideas, ways to gather information, ways to approach the Harrisons again, ways to build myself up until I was strong enough to fight. One rainy evening, as I walked back from a late shift at the diner, I saw a girl huddled by the corner store, shivering under a broken umbrella. Something about her face tugged at my memory. When I looked closer, my heart clenched. I knew her. "Lily?" I whispered. She looked up, eyes wide, and I was right. Lily had been in the same orphanage as me. She was a few years younger, always quiet, always hiding behind books. Life hadn't been kind to her either. She was homeless now, sleeping on benches, hungry, broken. I couldn't leave her there. I took her back to my apartment, gave her my spare blanket, shared what little food I had. The next day, I bought her clothes from the thrift store. She cried when I placed the bag in her hands. "You don't have to," she whispered. "I do," I told her. "We're sisters. Maybe not by blood, but by survival." That night, we sat up talking, sharing our wounds. She told me how she aged out of the orphanage with nothing, how she drifted from place to place, how the world chewed her up and spat her out. And I told her everything, the Harrisons, Michael, my stolen baby. By the time dawn broke, we weren't just friends anymore. We were family. Weeks passed, and Lily became my anchor. Together, we dreamed, we plotted, we planned. I told her, "I don't just want revenge, Lily. I want my son back. And I'll need eyes inside their house." That's when the idea came. With her sweet, gentle nature, Lily was perfect for it. We brushed her up, polished her appearance, gave her confidence. She applied for a job as a nanny through an agency, and soon enough, the Harrisons hired her. They thought she was just another desperate girl needing work. But they didn't know she was my sister. The first time Lily came back after stepping into that mansion, her voice was shaking as she said to me, "Emily, I saw him. I saw your boy." My heart almost stopped beating. "What did he look like?" I whispered, clutching her hand like it was life itself. "He's beautiful," she said softly. "He has your eyes." I broke down in tears, but for the first time since they stole him from me, they weren't just tears of pain. They were tears of hope. Because now I wasn't alone. And now, for the first time in years, I had a way back to my son. I bought Lily a small, cheap phone with part of the Harrisons' money, the only way I'd touch their dirty cash. Every evening after work, she'd send me photos of my boy. Not staged ones, but little glimpses of him, his hair falling into his eyes while he ate, his laugh as Lily played with him on his crib, his beautiful face, his tiny hands holding a toy car. I lived for those pictures. I rushed home from my shifts, tore off my apron, and opened her messages. Each photo was a dagger and a lifeline. My son, my boy, still out of reach, but alive. 6 months passed like that. 6 months of Lily living inside their mansion, playing the perfect nanny. 6 months of me working, saving, writing plans in my notebook. 6 months of learning everything I could about their routines, their habits, their weaknesses, through Lily's careful descriptions. By the end of the 6th month, I was ready. I'd built up a little savings. I'd built up information. I'd started quietly reaching out to people who could help me, not lawyers, not yet, but people who knew how to make things happen without drawing attention. My plan wasn't about the court or the police. Not yet. My plan was about timing, access, and leverage. And above all, my plan was built to protect Lily. She would never be exposed, never implicated. She would just keep doing her job, smiling at my son, while I moved the pieces outside. I didn't know exactly how it would all end. But for the first time since they stole him from me, I felt hope. Not just hope, power. Because now, I wasn't begging at their gate. Now, I was watching them from the shadows. And soon, they'd learn what it feels like to be caught off guard. I had been waiting for the right moment. 6 long months of pretending, of swallowing my pain, of smiling at pictures of my son on Lily's phone instead of feeling his tiny hands in mine. But patience pays off. The Harrisons were invited to one of those high society charity galas, the kind where everyone wore jewels heavier than their morals. They wanted to show off their perfect family, of course. And they were bringing my son. Lily told me about it a week before. We both knew this was the chance. On the night of the gala, Lily suddenly fell ill. She clutched her stomach and told Mrs. Harrison she couldn't go. Mrs. Harrison barely cared. She was too busy worrying about which diamond necklace would impress her friends. They left Lily behind and took my son with them. But what they didn't know was that Lily's illness was part of the plan. Hours earlier, we'd both dressed in plain uniforms that looked just like the catering staff. Black trousers, crisp white shirts, simple caps. Heavy makeup to change some of our features. No one would look twice at us. We slipped into the service entrance of the gala hall, blending in with dozens of real workers bustling about with trays of champagne and polished silver. I kept my head down, heart pounding so hard I thought everyone around me could hear it. Lily whispered, "Stay calm. This is just another job." But to me, this wasn't a job. This was life itself. And then I saw him. My little boy. My son. He was squirming in Mrs. Harrison's arms, crying, refusing the toy she tried to shove at him. His tiny fists pounded her shoulder. He was throwing a tantrum, the kind only a real mother knows how to calm. Mrs. Harrison looked annoyed, embarrassed, glancing around at the judgmental eyes of the other women in gowns. She spotted us, two workers standing nearby, and without hesitation, she thrust him into my arms. "Take him. Settle him down before he ruins the evening," she snapped. The world stopped. I held him. I held my son for the first time in months. His warmth, his smell, the weight of him against me, I almost collapsed. He buried his wet little face into my chest and clung to me like he knew. Like he remembered. I bit back tears, whispering into his ear. "Mommy's here. Mommy's here now." Lily stepped in smoothly, her face calm. She adjusted his blanket, smiled at Mrs. Harrison, and said, "We'll take care of him, ma'am," in an unnatural voice we practiced. Just like a flash, Mrs. Harrison looked at Lily like she's trying to remember where she has heard that voice from. I panicked, but I didn't show it. She left us to continue her discussion with the others. And just like that, we walked away. Not rushed. Not frantic. Just two staff members doing their job. We slipped out the side door, down the service hallway, and through the exit that led to the parking lot. My hands were trembling as we reached the car we had parked hours earlier. Bags already packed, tank full, route planned. Lily slid into the driver's seat while I buckled my son into the back. He was calmer now, his little fingers clutching mine. We drove. For 8 hours straight, through the night and into the dawn, we drove. Every mile between us and the Harrisons felt like a chain snapping off my soul. I didn't look back. Not once. When the sun finally rose, we pulled into a small town far away, into an apartment we'd rented under false names weeks earlier. Fresh paint, clean walls, 2 bedrooms, and a tiny balcony. To anyone else, it was ordinary. To me, it was paradise. We carried our bags inside, shut the door, and locked it. I sank onto the floor with my son in my arms, rocking him, kissing his head over and over. He looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes, as if he was trying to understand who I was. "I'm your mother," I whispered, tears streaming down my cheeks. "And no one will ever take you away from me again." Lily stood by the door, arms crossed, a tired smile on her face. "We did it, Em. He's home now." For the first time since that hospital, I felt whole again. The Harrisons would wake up to their nightmare soon enough. They'd scream, they'd panic, they'd call the police. But they'd be too late. We were ghosts now, living under new names in a new life. And I had what they could never buy, never steal, never fake: my son's love. This was only the beginning. The first few days in the new apartment felt unreal. I kept expecting a knock on the door, a policeman's shadow in the window, or Mrs. Harrison's cold voice demanding her grandson back. But none came. Lily and I laid low. We didn't use our real names anymore. I became Anna Gray, and Lily took the name Sophie. I dyed my hair darker, cut it shorter, and Lily picked up a pair of cheap glasses for me. Even the baby, my sweet boy, now had a new name on every piece of paper we touched. To the world outside, he was Daniel Gray, not the Harrison heir they paraded around at galas. Our little apartment 8 hours away wasn't much, but to me, it was heaven. The first morning, I cooked eggs while my son sat in a second-hand high chair Lily found at a thrift shop. He smeared yolk all over his tiny cheeks, laughed, and clapped his hands. It was messy, chaotic, and perfect. At night, I lay awake just staring at him sleeping beside me, listening to his soft breaths, memorizing every sound. I was finally living the moments they tried to steal from me. But happiness didn't erase the fear. A week later, Lily came home with a crumpled newspaper. The Harrisons had plastered my son's picture everywhere. The headline screamed, "Prominent business family's grandson abducted. Authorities investigating." My stomach dropped. "They're looking for us," Lily said quietly. I shook my head. "They're not looking for us. They're looking for Emily, and she doesn't exist here anymore." Still, I couldn't let my guard down. I avoided cameras, avoided crowded places, paid cash for everything. Lily worked odd jobs under her fake name while I stayed home with my boy, teaching him words, singing him songs, being the mother I was always meant to be. Sometimes, though, the fear crept back. Once, when a car slowed in front of our building, I grabbed my son and ducked under the window, heart hammering until it drove away. Another time, Lily spotted a man asking questions in the neighborhood, showing a picture of a little boy. We packed our bags that same night and moved to another small town before dawn. We became ghosts, shadows slipping from place to place. Each move was exhausting, but each time I reminded myself, as long as he was with me, it was worth it. The Harrisons might have their money, their power, their newspapers, but I had something they'd never understand: the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. And every day that bond grew stronger. My son called me Mama for the first time in that tiny kitchen, and I cried so hard I couldn't finish dinner. Still, deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. They wouldn't stop looking. Their pride wouldn't let them. The Harrisons thought they'd buried me with money and stole my child. But I was alive. I was free. And I was raising my son not as their puppet, not as their prize, but as mine. The Harrisons' search was closing in. Rumors of rewards, whispers of sightings, too many close calls. One night, while my son slept in my arms, I looked at Lily and said the words we'd both been too afraid to voice. "We can't just run town to town anymore. We have to disappear completely." She nodded slowly. Another continent. Asia became our answer. Far enough that the Harrisons' reach would blur, yet vast enough that we could vanish among millions. It took 3 months of saving, selling everything we didn't need, and working shifts until my hands bled. I sold my few pieces of jewelry, Lily picked up double shifts, and we scoured for the cheapest tickets. We kept our documents simple but believable, names that meant nothing, lives that no one could trace. The night we left, I carried one bag for me, one small suitcase for my son, and one for Lily. That was it. Our entire lives packed into 3 bags. At the airport, my heart pounded with every glance from a security guard, every stamp of a passport. But somehow, we slipped through. When the plane lifted off the ground, I pressed my forehead against the window, tears spilling silently. Below us, the country that had broken me shrank into darkness. Ahead of us, a new life stretched open, wide and waiting. We landed in a bustling Asian city that smelled of street food, incense, and rain. Everything was alive. Neon lights, crowds of people, the hum of scooters weaving through traffic. It was overwhelming, but it also felt like freedom. No one here knew Emily. No one here cared about the Harrisons. We rented a small apartment above a noodle shop. The walls were thin, the air heavy with the scent of broth and spices, but it was safe. Lily and I found jobs quickly, she as a nanny again, me in a bakery down the street where language didn't matter as much as hard work. My son, now toddling and curious, blended right in. The neighbors smiled at him, the shopkeepers slipped him candy, and soon he was running barefoot with the local children, laughing without a shadow of fear in his eyes. We dressed like the locals, ate what they ate, lived simply. No more secondhand thrift stores, no more hiding under blankets when cars passed by. Here, we were just another small family making ends meet. For the first time since the hospital, I felt what it meant to live without chains. At night, I sat on the balcony with Lily, listening to the city breathe. "Do you think they'll ever find us here?" she asked. I shook my head. Even if they looked, they wouldn't recognize us anymore. We belong here now. This is home. And I meant it. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. My son was growing, learning, thriving. Lily had become my true sister, my anchor. We weren't broken orphans anymore. We were a family we'd built ourselves. The Harrisons could keep their money, their reputation, their hollow power. I had something stronger: freedom, love, and the unshakable bond of a mother who had crossed oceans to keep her child safe. And here, on this new continent, we weren't ghosts. We were alive. Alive and unafraid. The first year in Asia was all about survival. New city, new language, new faces. But slowly, survival turned into living. And then living turned into thriving. I worked long hours in the bakery, my hands powdered in flour, my son playing in a corner, with wooden blocks as the smell of fresh bread filled the air. The owner, a kind old woman with silver hair pulled into a bun, said to me quickly, "You have strong hands and a soft heart," she'd say. "Both are rare." One day, she pulled me aside and offered me something I never expected: partnership. She was getting older, she said, and needed someone who cared about the shop as much as she did. I nearly cried on the spot. Within months, I was co-managing the bakery. The little shop became not just a place of work, but a second home. Locals came not only for bread but for warmth. They'd sit, drink tea, chat, and watch my boy grow taller by the day. By the time he turned 5, the bakery's name had changed. Painted in bright letters above the door, Daniel's Bread. A tribute to the child who had been stolen, but was now the heart of my world. Meanwhile, Lily bloomed too. She had always been my shadow, my anchor, but here, she began to shine on her own. She met him at the market, a gentle man who sold fruit from a wooden cart. His name was Kai. At first, she brushed him off, shy and wary. But Kai was patient. He noticed the way she always picked the ripest bananas for my son, the way she laughed softly when the kids in the street chased pigeons. Week after week, he'd slip an extra apple into her basket. One day, he walked her home, carrying her groceries. Another day, he fixed the leaking tap in our apartment without being asked. I watched it unfold with quiet joy. Lily, who had once slept under bus stops and cried herself to sleep, was smiling again. Real smiles, the kind that lit up her whole face. One evening, as my son colored on the floor, Lily sat beside me on the balcony, cheeks pink. "He asked me to dinner," she whispered. I grinned. "And what did you say?" I said yes. Weeks turned into months, and Lily's bond with Kai grew deep and steady, like roots pushing into the earth. He never asked too much about her past. He just accepted her as she was. For once in her life, she wasn't someone's burden. She was someone's choice. And in that love, I saw healing for both of us. By the time my son started school, our lives looked ordinary on the surface. A small family, a thriving bakery, a child with bright eyes and messy hair, a woman falling in love. But beneath that surface was a strength forged through fire. We were no longer the orphans left behind. No longer the women begging at gates. We were building a future, brick by brick, loaf by loaf, smile by smile. And as I stood in front of the bakery one evening, holding my son's hand while Lily laughed with Kai nearby, I realized something. The Harrisons had tried to bury me with money and cruelty. But I had turned their betrayal into the soil where my new life grew. And now, on this continent, thousands of miles away, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was home. Years passed in our little corner of Asia, and life blossomed in ways I never thought possible. My son grew taller, stronger, his laughter echoing through the bakery like sunlight breaking through clouds. He loved kneading dough beside me, his small hands sinking into the flour as if he was born to be there. Locals adored him, Daniel, the little baker, they'd call. He belonged, truly belonged, in a way I never had as a child. And somewhere in the middle of flower-dusted mornings and quiet nights on the balcony, love found me again. His name was Arjun. He owned the small bookshop across the street from the bakery. At first, he was just a friendly neighbor, always waving when I opened the shutters in the morning. But soon, he became more. He brought me books he thought I'd like, novels, poetry, stories of strong women. He learned to bake bread just so he could spend more time in my shop. One evening, after the bakery closed, he walked me home under the lantern-lit street. "Emily," he said softly, "you've carried too much pain alone. Let me carry some of it with you." For the first time in years, I let myself lean on someone. And slowly, I fell, not with the desperate rush of a girl, but with the steady certainty of a woman who had been broken and rebuilt herself. Lily, too, found her forever. Kai's devotion never wavered, and one warm spring morning, he knelt in front of her at the market, holding a simple silver ring. She said yes through tears, her hands shaking as the crowd cheered. It felt only right that Lily and I marry on the same day. Two sisters who had once slept on cold floors and shared scraps of bread were now standing side by side in silk dresses, their children tugging at their skirts, their men waiting at the altar. My son walked me down the aisle, his little chest puffed out with pride, and when I said I do to Arjun, I knew I had finally closed the door on the Harrison's shadow. Marriage brought more joy than I ever imagined. Lily and Kai had a daughter first, a sweet girl with wide eyes. Arjun and I soon welcomed another child too, a little girl with my smile and his calm eyes. Our children grew up side by side, cousins by choice if not by blood, in a house filled with love, bread, and laughter. But as my son grew older, questions began to surface. One night, when he was 12, he sat across from me at the table, his brow furrowed. "Mama," he asked softly, "who is my father?" "Your father," I began slowly, "was a boy who didn't know how to be a man. He made choices that hurt me. But out of those choices, I got you, the best thing in my life. That's all you need to know." But he wasn't satisfied. As he grew into a teenager, the curiosity sharpened. He wanted to know where he came from, who Michael was, why we had fled so far. And one day, fate brought the answers to him. It was during a school trip back to Europe. He was 17, confident, tall, with a stubborn streak that reminded me of myself. While walking through the airport, he recognized a face he had only seen in an old, crumpled photo Lily had once saved from the days she worked in the Harrison's family as Daniel's nanny. My heart stilled. I had been waiting for this moment, dreading it. I set down my spoon and looked into his eyes, Michael's eyes, though gentler, kinder. Michael. Older now, lines around his eyes, but unmistakably him. My son froze. Their eyes met, and for the first time, father and son stood face to face. Michael didn't know the boy was his own blood. But my son knew. And in that moment, the past collided with the present. He told me about it later, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and confusion. He had been standing in the airport cafe line, passport in hand, when he saw him. A man with the same jawline, the same shade of brown eyes, older, sharper, but familiar in a way that shook him. Michael. My son said, his chest tightened, his fists clenched, and before he even knew what he was doing, his feet were carrying him forward. Michael Harrison? Michael turned, surprised, sizing up the tall boy in front of him. He gave a polite nod. Yes. Do I know you? My son swallowed hard. No. But I know you. Michael frowned, puzzled. From where? The words slipped out like a blade. From my mother's nightmares. Michael blinked, startled. Excuse me. You don't remember her, do you? My son pressed, voice cracking. Emily. The girl you got pregnant. The girl your family threw away like trash. The girl who gave birth to me. Michael's face went pale, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't breathe. What did you just say? I'm your son, my boy said fiercely, his hands shaking. The son you never wanted. The son your family stole from my mother. She raised me without you. She protected me from you. And I don't need anything from you, but I wanted you to know. To see my face. To know what you left behind. Michael staggered back a step, running a hand over his face. This is impossible. But it was. Every line of my son's face screamed the truth. He told me that for a long moment, Michael just stared at him, as if the world had tilted beneath his feet. Then, in a voice low and broken, he whispered, "You look just like her." My son didn't stay long. He turned and walked away before Michael could say another word, before he could reach out, before he could apologize for wounds that time could never erase. Tears burned my eyes as I pulled him into my arms. "You're stronger than I ever was," I murmured. "You gave him the truth I never got to speak." And for the first time, I realized something important. I had spent years running from Michael and his family, years fearing their shadow. But in the end, it wasn't me who delivered justice. It was my son. He carried my truth, my pain, my strength, and he had the courage to place it right in Michael's face. And that was enough. It didn't take long after my son's encounter with Michael. Within weeks, thick white envelopes stamped with legal seals began arriving at our doorstep. Summons. Accusations. A lawsuit filed in the name of the Harrison family, claiming I had abducted my own child years ago, stolen him from their care, and raised him under a false identity. My blood boiled as I read the words. Abduction? Stolen? False identity? No, what they had done to me all those years ago was abduction. They had stolen my baby. They had left me alone in a hospital bed with nothing but a wad of cash, like I was a prostitute being paid off after a shameful act. I was trembling, but I refused to be weak again. This time, I had something I never had before, proof. The hospital discharge papers. The signed birth records with my name as the mother. Nurses who had witnessed how Mrs. Harrison came and took my baby that night, promising to handle everything. Old social workers from the orphanage who remembered how vulnerable I had been when I was tossed out. And most importantly, my son himself. A grown young man who was willing to stand and speak the truth. So I filed my own counterclaim. Kidnapping. Fraud. Emotional abuse. Custodial interference. I named both Michael and his mother, Mrs. Harrison. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and power when the day finally came. The Harrisons sat in their pressed designer suits, heads high, their lawyers whispering confidently in their ears. They thought money could rewrite history, the way it always had for them. But when I rose to speak, my voice didn't tremble. I told the judge everything, how I was an orphan girl, desperate for love, taken advantage of by their son. How, when I gave birth, they smiled at me with fake kindness, only to rip my newborn from my arms. How they silenced me with money and threats, treating me like filth unworthy of motherhood. Then I showed the discharge notes, the cash slip, the letters I'd kept, even the photographs Lily had taken when she worked in their home, showing my son in their mansion before I finally rescued him. Gasps filled the room. Mrs. Harrison's face turned white. Michael kept his head low, refusing to meet my eyes. But the real blow came when my son stood, tall and unflinching. "I am living proof," he said firmly, looking the judge in the eye. "I was taken from my mother. I grew up being told lies. She didn't kidnap me. She saved me. She's the only parent I've ever had. The Harrisons abandoned her, abducted me, and they don't deserve to call me theirs now." The courtroom was silent. For once, money and power couldn't bury the truth. And I felt something stir inside me, the same fire that had carried me out of that hospital years ago, the same fire that helped me plot my escape with Lily, the same fire that gave me the strength to build a new life across continents. This time, I wasn't just surviving. I was fighting. And I was winning. The courtroom became a battlefield. The Harrison lawyers came armed with binders so thick they could have been bricks, every page filled with half-truths and twisted narratives. They had the arrogance of men who believed they could bend the law with the weight of their wallets. Their lead attorney, a sharp-tongued man with slicked-back hair, stood tall. "Your Honor, let's be clear," he began. "This case is nothing more than an attempt by Ms. Emily Turner to rewrite history for financial gain. The Harrisons rescued her child when she, an unfit, unstable, penniless orphan, abandoned him in the hospital. She was incapable of caring for him then, and she is incapable now. What she calls kidnapping was an act of mercy. The words made my stomach twist, but I sat still. Then they brought out their so-called evidence. Pushpin bank records showing the $5,000 they had left for me in the hospital, twisted as financial support. Pushpin fabricated testimonies from a nurse who claimed I had signed away my baby willingly. Pushpin even character witnesses, polished family friends, who painted me as reckless, unstable, and manipulative. I clenched my fists under the table. They were rewriting my pain, turning my abandonment into a gift. When it was my lawyer's turn, he called me to the stand. My palms were damp, but I raised my hand, swore the oath, and sat down. Their attorney pounced immediately. "Miss Turner, is it true that you were homeless at the time you gave birth?" "Yes," I admitted calmly. "And is it true that the Harrisons provided you with money and assistance afterward?" "They provided money," I said, my voice firm. "But not assistance. They took my baby and left me with nothing." "Isn't it possible, Miss Turner," he sneered, "that you are misremembering? That you, desperate and unable to cope, handed your son to them willingly?" I leaned forward, my voice steady but cold. "You don't forget the moment your child is stolen from your arms. That memory burns into you like fire. I didn't hand him over. He was taken." The lawyer smirked, as if amused by my defiance, and turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, note her emotional instability." But my side wasn't done. My lawyer called Lily to the stand. She walked up with quiet dignity, her hands clasped, her eyes hard. "Ms. Lily Grant," my attorney said, "you worked as a nanny in the Harrison household, correct?" "Yes," she said. "And did you ever witness behavior that supports Emily's claim?" Lily's eyes flicked to the Harrisons, then back to the judge. "Yes. I saw Mrs. Harrison scold the boy for calling out for his real mother. I heard her tell him, 'Forget her, we're your only family now.' I also took photos, proof that he was in their care while Emily had no access to him." Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the photographs appeared on the screen. My son as a toddler in the Harrisons' mansion, dressed like their heir, but with sadness etched into his tiny face. Mrs. Harrison's composure cracked for the first time. Still, the Harrisons weren't done. On the third day, they called Michael to the stand. He walked with stiff shoulders, his suit immaculate, but his eyes started nervously. The lawyer asked, "Mr. Harrison, do you believe Emily Turner capable of being a mother back then?" Michael swallowed. "No. She wasn't ready. I wasn't either. My parents did what they thought was best." I locked eyes with him from across the courtroom. He flinched. Then my lawyer stood. "Mr. Harrison, are you aware your son confronted you at the airport weeks ago?" Michael froze. "Yes." "And in that moment, did you recognize him?" Michael's lips parted. "Yes, he looks like me. Like her." "Then tell us," my lawyer pressed, his voice sharp, "if Emily was so unfit, why did your son, healthy, educated, well-raised, seek her comfort, her home, her love, instead of yours?" The silence that followed was crushing. Michael's hands trembled on the witness stand. The jury's eyes shifted. The balance was tilting. And for the first time, I saw the Harrisons afraid. The Harrison lawyers weren't done with me yet. On the fourth day, they brought out their sharpest weapon, a woman dressed in a crisp nurse's uniform. She took the stand with a straight back and a rehearsed calm. "State your name," the lawyer said. "Patricia Miller," she replied. "And your occupation?" "Retired nurse." "And were you on duty the night Emily Turner gave birth?" "Yes." The lawyer smiled like a cat who'd cornered its prey. "Can you tell the court what you witnessed?" Nurse Patricia folded her hands neatly. "Yes. I saw Ms. Turner sign documents voluntarily, giving custody of her baby to the Harrison family. She was emotional, yes, but she was certain. She told me she couldn't raise the child." The Harrisons stepped in out of kindness. The jury whispered among themselves. The Harrison lawyer leaned back, satisfied. But I was on my feet before my lawyer could object. "That's a lie," I shouted. The judge banged the gavel. "Miss Turner, control yourself." I sat down, but my heart was pounding so hard I thought it would shatter my ribs. When it was our turn to cross-examine, my lawyer approached the nurse slowly. Ms. Miller, you say Emily signed documents? Yes, she said smoothly. Do you have those documents? She hesitated. No, the Harrisons retained them. Interesting. So, you can't show us a single scrap of paper with her signature, can you? The nurse shifted in her seat. No, but I remember. Do you also remember, my lawyer cut in, that you were suspended twice during your career for misconduct involving patient records? Gasps filled the room. The nurse's eyes widened. Yes, my lawyer pressed, flipping through a file. In 1999 and 2003, you were disciplined for falsifying documents to protect wealthy clients. Do you deny that? The nurse stammered. I don't recall. You don't recall? My lawyer snapped. Because the state board recalls very clearly. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, I submit that this witness's credibility is fundamentally compromised. The jury's murmurs grew louder. Mrs. Harrison's face flushed red. But that wasn't the last twist. On the fifth day, Lily produced something no one expected. While cleaning the Harrison mansion, she had once stumbled upon a locked drawer in Mrs. Harrison's study. Inside, she found an old letter, never meant to be seen. She had copied it, sensing it might be important one day. Now, that day had come. The letter was from Mrs. Harrison to a family friend, written weeks after my son was born. In it, she bragged about how they had taken in Michael's illegitimate child, how Emily was pathetic, begging for her baby back, and how they had silenced her with cash. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as the words were read aloud. Mrs. Harrison's mask shattered. She slammed her hand against the table. That letter was private. You had no right. The judge cut her off sharply. Order in the court. For the first time, the jury wasn't looking at me with pity, they were looking at the Harrisons with disgust. And I sat there, my hands trembling but my back straight, finally seeing their empire of lies start to crumble. The courtroom was so silent, it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. The only sound was the shuffle of papers as the judge adjusted his glasses and looked sternly over the bench. Having heard the testimonies, reviewed the exhibits, and considered the lives torn apart by your actions, this court is ready to deliver its judgment. Everyone's eyes darted toward Mrs. Harrison. She sat stiffly in her chair, lips pursed, her once carefully styled hair falling out of place after weeks of trial. Michael shifted beside her, pale, his hands trembling. The judge's voice deepened. Mrs. Margaret Harrison, the evidence against you is overwhelming. You orchestrated the abduction of an innocent child, attempted to traffic him under false pretenses, manipulated court proceedings with lies, and obstructed justice at every turn. These acts are not just illegal, they are malicious, predatory, and destructive. A murmur rippled across the gallery. Mrs. Harrison's attorney whispered frantically to her, but she brushed him off with a sharp glare, still clinging to defiance. This court finds you guilty of kidnapping, child trafficking, conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, and obstruction of justice. For these crimes, you are hereby sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. You will serve no less than 20 years before eligibility for parole. Gasps echoed across the room. Mrs. Harrison's composure cracked. She gripped the wooden table so hard her knuckles whitened. This is outrageous, she spat. I did this for my family. Silence in the courtroom, the judge thundered, striking his gavel. Mrs. Harrison's words were drowned by the sound of the bailiff stepping closer, ready to restrain her if needed. Turning to Michael, the judge's tone softened, but only slightly. Michael Harrison, the court acknowledges that you were influenced by your mother, but that does not absolve you of your choices. You knowingly attempted to aid in the abduction of your son, subjected Emily to emotional torment, and prolonged this case with deceit. Therefore, you are sentenced to 15 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 10 years. Michael buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. For the first time, he looked less like a man defending himself and more like a boy realizing he had destroyed his own life. The judge continued firmly. In addition, this court hereby terminates all parental rights of Michael Harrison over the child. Full and permanent custody is granted to Emily Turner. Any attempt at interference from the Harrison family will result in further prosecution. I gasped, hand flying to my mouth. Tears spilled freely as relief crashed over me like a tidal wave. Lily, seated beside me, clasped my trembling hand, whispering, "It's over. You're free." The gallery stirred again, some in shock, others nodding in approval. Mrs. Harrison's face twisted with rage, but she could do nothing as the bailiffs moved closer. Her empire of control had finally crumbled. The judge struck the gavel with finality. Court is adjourned. The sound of the gavel echoed like thunder, sealing the fate of the Harrisons. I stood slowly, my knees weak, my chest heaving with sobs. This wasn't just victory, it was the end of a nightmare. I turned to Lily. We wrapped ourselves in a fierce embrace. For the first time in years, I felt safe. Justice had prevailed. The gavel's echo still hung in the air when the bailiffs approached Mrs. Harrison. She pushed back her chair with a screech, her voice cutting through the courtroom like glass. "This is a lie. A conspiracy," she shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She stole my son's mind, turned him against me. I am the victim here, not her." Her lawyer tugged at her sleeve, whispering desperately, "Please, sit down," but she wrenched her arm away. "You'll all regret this," she cried, her face red with fury. "I built this family, I gave Michael everything, and you dare strip me of my legacy? That child was mine to raise, mine to protect." The gallery erupted, some gasping, others shaking their heads. One woman muttered, "She's lost her mind." The bailiff stepped closer. "Ma'am, it's time to leave." Mrs. Harrison thrashed as they gripped her arms. "Don't touch me," she screeched. "Emily, you witch. You'll pay for this, mark my words." I didn't move. I sat still, holding Lily's hand tightly, my tears drying into strength. For once, I wasn't afraid. I looked at Mrs. Harrison, not with fear, but with pity. "Take her away," the judge commanded sternly. The bailiff snapped the cold metal cuffs onto Mrs. Harrison's wrists. She jerked against them, wild-eyed, her hair falling across her face. "No, you can't do this to me. I am the Harrison name." Her screams echoed down the hall as she was dragged from the courtroom, her empire of intimidation collapsing with every step. The heavy doors slammed shut behind her, leaving a hush in her wake. Michael slumped forward, his sobs muffled against the table. He didn't even look up as another bailiff stood at his side, waiting to escort him to holding. I closed my eyes and exhaled a trembling breath. My husband kissed my temple softly and whispered, "It's really over." The nightmare had ended. Justice had not only spoken, it had roared. I kept wondering, what if they haven't thrown the first stone? I actually didn't plan on suing them. But Mrs. Harrison was still bitter and wanted nothing but my downfall. She wanted to imprison me to feel good about herself and their wealth, but she only realized that money can't buy justice, and it's already too late. I am here, free, thriving, living happily with my husband and children. Lily too. We couldn't pray for more. The end. Please subscribe to Gentle Whisper and comment your opinion, share, and help us go viral. Thanks.